that you think you could run your favourite cricket team better than those who do. But no one is going to let you do that. So why not try Wicket Cricket Manager to satisfy that urge? Pick your nation, pick your league, pick your players, and yell at them when they do poorly. You can find it in the links below or by searching for Wicket Cricket Manager in your app store today. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket. Welcome everyone, and I am Jared Kimber, and this is the Scoreboard, and we are going to be having a look at, well, I was going to say the game between India and Afghanistan, but perhaps the game between Rohit Sharma and Afghanistan, because he came into Virat Kohli's hometown and he hogged all the available limelight. I mean, the fans, to be fair to them, still tried to make a fairly big show for Virat Kohli, but Rohit Sharma was having absolutely none of that. Rashid Khan, on the other hand, he went, I have to send out a search party. He seemed to have gone missing at certain parts. Then when he was found, probably wished he'd stayed missing, if we're being honest. The middle order mats, as I'm now calling them, did very, very well for Afghanistan. But Afghanistan as a team could never score enough on what was a fairly featherbed wicket. And of course, eventually, it was just all about Rohit and that incredible knock. So let's not muck around. Let's start the scoreboard right here and go through the tape, shall we? So the thing about today that I can't get out of my mind is that Rohit has scored more runs than he did today, and also batted this fast before. It's a remarkable thing. But then we have a look at this beauty as well. He now has the most hundreds in World Cup history, and the most hundreds in World Cup it's an interesting mark, and I'll tell you why. Because your career could sort of overlap poorly. It's the same with Olympians. There are some Olympians who might dominate for 12 years, but they might not win 4 gold medals because of that, because the years don't overlap correctly. And World Cups work the exact same way. If you look at Rohit, he's really just starting his World Cup. Oh, sorry, he's not played a great amount of World Cups, certainly not in positions where he could make hundreds all the time. And yet in that small period of time, and we've just started this tournament, so he's got a chance of 2 or 3 more. 2 more. Let's say 2 more. Let's be fair. Right at the moment, say 2 more, but it's maybe 3. And he's already the leader. It's a remarkable record, and it's a testament to the way that he steps up on the biggest stage. But also, I think very, very, very specifically for him, it's the fact that he can score very consistently, but at a very good strike rate. And it's the combination of those two things, which is what gets you the most hundreds in World Cup history, I suppose. But there's some other fun things that I like in this as well. He's also, for someone who hasn't played that much World Cup cricket, this is the list of the 24 highest scoring run scorers in the history of World Cups. You can see that, Sachin's doing okay, and Ponting and Kumar are very, very high up here as well. But these are the 24 players all in that have scored over 1,000 runs at a World Cup. And there's no scrubs here. Like, I think the worst one-day player here is probably Fleming, is it? And he's certainly not a dud. And everyone else here can really, really play. There's also, just worth noting, that Shakib Al Hassan is on this list. And the only reason I mention that is because he's also got quite a few wickets. So he's on the list of the most runs and the most wickets. And I don't think we give that enough credit. Anyway, that's for another day. But the other thing that I wanted, the main reason I wanted to mention this, that he's on the top 24 run scorers of all time, because he also has the highest batting average of any player in a World Cup ever. So you can see Rohit Sharma's at the top, and you've got AB and Viv Richards. The incredible thing about these two players, of course, is that they also have brilliant strike rates, especially for their era. But if Rohit has a good series here, he could kick ahead. Like, it's actually possible that he can go into that. And I thought this was absolutely, I think it just shows how good he has been in World Cups. And I looked this up on a whim. I wasn't like I was looking it up because I thought Rohit Sharma had the best batting average of anyone in a World Cup history. So Even I was shocked at this number. Anyway, let's just have a look at a couple of the clips here because there's something very specific from this innings that I really, really do want to talk about. This is Rohit starting in a very, very normal fashion. You can see, just working the ball away to leg. Obviously, that's a real strength of the way he plays. Your bottom hand player. But everything here is timing, right? And when he gets a bad ball, he puts it away. But something changes, and it must be after this next ball. We can suddenly see that he actually starts to go down. He actually goes down the wicket a little bit there, and you could see that that was in the 4th over, right? So it's really interesting that he's going down the ground so early on in an innings. Real intent, to use a T20 word for you. This is another one. I like that shot because he checked it a little bit. This one is just absolute pure class. So that's 3. That's 4. We are still in the first 10 overs. Is that 5? Now I feel like I'm pressing replay on the same ones over and over again, and I apologize. And then he has this one across the line. This is a slightly different kind of shot because the others all went down the ground. But again, this is a length ball at and around off stump. And we know he can play all these shots. And yes, KL Rahul having the correct response to all these. And look, we know he could play all these shots, right? Went too far forward there. So it's not as if there's an issue with the fact that he can play them. What I found was interesting is that he summed up the conditions really early on. He realized it was a good batting pitch. He realized that the bowling, although good, probably wasn't going to trouble him on the surface, and that clearly he was seeing the ball like a beach balloon. But then the fact that he actually put the foot down so hard, and I think that transformation of him as a player is really, really interesting over the last couple of years. So that now, he's much more like an English-style opener in limited overs cricket. What a weird phrase to say as someone who grew up in the 90s. Anyway, he's much more like an English-style opener in the way that he goes about his innings at the moment. Just really being aggressive at the top. He didn't need to play these shots, I suppose is the best way of pointing it out. These are clear choices. In some cases, he even manufactured them a little bit. And then, this one's a little bit, reminds me of that David Warner story about when he's facing Vinay Kumar and first ball he hits him for 6 in a test match. And Ed Cowan goes down and goes, "I thought you were going to see him out." And David Warner says, "Yeah, I just, it was in my wheelhouse." That was in my wheelhouse. That's what happens. That face, of course, is also what happens when you see someone who has just seen a ball in their wheelhouse and destroyed it. But I just want to have a look at this. This is his strike rate, so over his entire career. And cumulative is not always the best way of showing it. We could probably show it on a five game rolling would maybe be a better way of showing it. But I can't do that because I was watching the game and making these videos, preparing these videos all at the same time. But you could see here that realistically from sort of that middle of his career, and I think this is obviously when he starts making the 200s. I think this is around the 2015 period. He does really start to get a lot more aggressive after that. And look, he's also had a bit of a slight dip in there as well. But from where he was, this kind of player, all the way through to here is just a massive increase. And there's no doubt that he's doing all that on purpose, and he's trying to become a different kind of player. Just wanted to show this one. This is his ODI innings all the way through his career, although I think I've got the last score wrong. It's going to annoy me, might annoy you, I don't know. And I put this arrow in for, essentially, this is the period more or less where he starts to open the batting. So you can see that as a middle order player, he doesn't really have a lot of success. And he does struggle. And as he becomes an opener, we see a lot more high-end peaks. Of course we do, because he gets more chance to score those runs. I think, though, at this period, he probably certainly needed to be an opening batter. I think he was still working on his game. I think he was still understanding what Rohit Sharma, the limited overs batter, could do. He got that early praise. I think it was from Viv Richards. And for a long time, we were waiting for the maturation, right? There's a big difference between seeing the ball like Rohit Sharma does, having the kind of technique that Rohit Sharma does, but putting everything together and believing that you are that person. In this period here, I thought he needed to open. After this, I don't think he does. But the fact that he has continued to open and obviously has gone on to be so successful, you could see the big change in his career from that point of view. This is the innings today, and I just wanted to show you this one. So this is 131 runs at a strike rate of 156. Obviously, we got the three big fellas up here and a lot of other really, really good scores. What I find so interesting about this graphic, and I use this for Kusal Mendes, and I wanted to have a look at Rohit's career just a little bit as well. And the thing I find so fascinating about him is actually, I'm just going to go back. The consistent nature of his run scoring is a part of who he is as a player, you know, averaging just under 50, or I don't know, did it go over 50 today? I wasn't watching, but, you know, averaging around that 50 mark in one-day international cricket, which, you know, that just shows incredible consistency to be able to do that. But at the same time, what I found really interesting about this is the amount of really obscene outliers. Like some of these are lower scores. Obviously, he got off to a good start, but this one here is 51 at a strike rate of 182. You've then got the 3 double hundreds, which are incredible outliers, and now you have this one. Even if you had a normal opener, would probably be a bit more like this. And he just has the ability to go into that other gear. It's actually a shame in some ways that he hasn't fully developed that part of his career all the time, because in a different kind of batting lineup, if he'd been batting in England's team, for instance, and there aren't that many other batting lineups that would have freed Rohit up, but I think we would actually see just so many more things around this area, right? And it's watching him bat the way he did today, where he matched the consistency, the calmness, the ability to read the conditions with just that little bit of, well, I'm better than all these guys. And the truth is, to go back all the way to that Viv Richards comment, he's kind of always been better than everyone else, but it's been a slow burn, and he doesn't have that kind of run scoring thirst that Sachin Tendulkar and, you know, Ricky Ponting and Don Bradman and, you know, Virat Kohli kind of have. And he also doesn't really have that kind of dominant personality of, you know, well, personality is wrong, that dominant sort of run scoring style of, you know, Viv Richards and AB de Villiers and, I don't know, Wally Hammond and Clive Lloyd and those sorts of players. But within him, he has a combination of both. And because he's so talented, he probably goes between both of them. But just an extraordinary innings today. And yes, very flat pitch. And there are obviously some issues within the Afghanistani bowling, which we will get to in a moment, of course. But don't let that take away from the artistry, the intent, the technical skills that went into making this innings. And I think it's a really important thing. You know, we saw Aiden Markram make his 100 as well. And I saw, other, you know, people saying, well, it's a flat pitch. 2 other people have made 100s. None of that's not true, right? And it is true. And those things need to be mentioned. But you go through, and Aiden Markram and Rohit Sharma have a very similar, you know, both maybe developed later than they should have, considering their talent. Both bigger, stronger players, you know, who have a bit of power and hitting ability to their game, but they're not sloggy type players. They're not clearing the front leg or anything like that. They're playing proper shots, and they're maybe slightly mismatched at times between those two things. Anyway, this is the highest strike rates in the power play over since 2022. Caveat on all this, of course, is that, you know, England hasn't been the same kind of team that we have seen in the previous World Cup. They haven't played enough one days. They haven't used the same players all the time. Jason Roy was out of form. I could go on. But even having said that, Rohit Sharma having the second best strike rate in that period is something very, very meaningful. And we'd already shown before, you know, his overall strike rate has gone up. But I think for me, and that's why I showed all those boundaries in the first 10 overs. That's why I focused on that with the clips. Is he is really changing the way of when he attacks and how he attacks. And these are really, really great signs, because the innings that he played today, yes, it would be harder to do that against New Zealand or South Africa or Australia, you know, some of the really good bowling attacks, you know, Pakistan. It would be hard to do that. Not impossible, but it would be harder to play that kind of innings. But if he shows that kind of intent and that kind of calmness and the ability to match it with the technical control that he clearly has, he can play an innings that can be a knockout game in a World Cup. And as great as Rohit Sharma has been at times, he does get a little bit cautious and he does pull back. Today was exactly what you want him to do going forward. And, you know, the ability to sum up the conditions that quickly and be that good, remarkable. And you can just see here over the years, it really is that period when he took over the team and Dravid took over the team. When I think they started to think about white ball cricket a little bit differently as a side. So it would make sense in a sort of Brendan McCullum, Ben Stokes kind of way that Rohit has tried to lead the way in this. And it hasn't always worked, of course. They had 2 disappointing T20 World Cups. Are a long way away from winning. I mean, they've got like 83 more games before we get to the final. My wife said this the other day, that why does every team need to play 9 games in order to work out who the top 4 teams are? It is when you put it that way, you just have to think to yourself, what have we done? How have we ended up with this? But it's a long way to go from that point of view. But certainly things have changed. But yeah, I could go on. In fact, I will make a proper video about Rohit Sharma and specifically his World Cup batting, which will be on the main channel, where I want to get into it a little bit deeper. But today he was quite clearly the major part of the story. But from Afghanistan's point of view, I think that they had a really, really interesting subplot here, which is, of course, related to what Rohit did. And Rashid Khan, we've talked about it already, and I think I'll probably need to make a full video about this going forward. But Rashid Khan, his one-day international bowling against the best teams does need to be questioned. But there's this other thing, and I heard this noise today, and I hear it all the time, and it's when you're watching Afghanistan play and they're struggling a little bit with the ball, people start to go, wait a minute, where is Rashid Khan and why is he not bowling? And I've been hearing this for ages. In T20 cricket, I think we might have done this for the last World Cup, his overs are almost all after the 10-over mark. He doesn't like to bowl before the 10-over mark at all. And he essentially does this over and over again. So if you watch a lot of Afghanistan cricket, as I have, you hear people moaning about this because unless you're an expert on Afghanistan cricket, you wouldn't understand this. However, and I'll show it now, this is what he does in one-day cricket. And you can see that, again, really not bowling a lot early on. I think maybe in the 7th over, he's bowled 1 over. And I think this is his whole ODI career. I think I looked at the whole thing for this. I've now forgotten my own work. But you can see that just down here, there's nothing at all. Now, that's fine. I know he doesn't like to bowl with the new ball. And I know that Afghanistan want to use him later on. And that they had a very, very set plan for how he would go and how they would go in this particular game. And that is it, the pattern is here, right? There's nothing that you could, that is surprising. But the problem today was this is the 14th over here, right? So you can see it isn't really until the 15th over that he starts bowling. Well, by the 14th over today, I think I've got this right, India were 126 for none. They were basically half of Afghanistan's score. And so by leaving himself in a position where he didn't come on till his normal over, and he came on for the 15th, which you can see is a pattern. So I don't think it was a mistake that he came on for that over. It meant that the game was completely over by that point, right? And he bowled a really good first over. He actually ends up getting hit quite a bit later on, but his first over, I think, went for 4 runs. If that first over is here, or here, even here, maybe it was too late by that point. You're probably not going to bowl him in the first 6 or 7, but by the 8th over, you can see that there would have been plenty of reason to be able to use him as a bowler. And they didn't. And because of that, by the time he came on, he wasn't in the game. And for me, we have seen him when he plays for... we've seen him in franchise cricket, and not just in the IPL, but around the world, quite often come on earlier when there is an issue. He used to bowl an over in the power play quite regularly for, Adelaide, for instance, as well. I haven't checked his Sussex numbers or his 100 numbers, but he can bowl early, especially when it is needed. So what was happening today? Is it the 2 new balls mean he didn't want to come on earlier? But we've seen him bowl with a pretty new ball from time to time. It just seemed that they had a really rigid plan and they didn't change it. It'd be interesting. Obviously, I'm recording while the press conferences are going on, and maybe no one will be asked about this, but it felt like they held him back too late. And yes, as I've shown here, they traditionally hold him back late, but this was not the game to do that in. And if he takes 3 wickets, let's say he starts in the 15th, he takes, I don't know, one straight away, another one in the 19th, and maybe another one in the 23rd or whatever. I still think the game would have been away from them today, right? Like, even if he'd been a success, it would have been too late. He would have had to do something absolutely, miraculous. And I have seen, and Afghanistan is guilty of this, but I've seen franchise teams do this as well, sort of put themselves in a position where Rashid has to, like, save them completely, right? And it's not a realistic place to be. But I would say that, the bigger issue at the moment is probably not the fact he got hidden today, although, certainly didn't help. I think the bigger issue at the moment is that he continues to go for lots of runs against very good batting lineups. It happened again today. He kind of went missing twice for Afghanistan today. He went missing when they needed him to bowl, and then he went missing when he was actually bowling. So it was a really, really poor performance from him today, and also from his captain for not just saying, mate, take the ball. You need to bowl now. And one thing I would say about him, waiting this late to come into the game is you don't keep a nuke in your arsenal if you've already, until you've already been conquered, right? The idea of having a nuclear weapon, is as a deterrent. And I just think that if they tried him a little bit earlier, perhaps Rohit still does the same thing. Maybe there's absolutely no difference, but at least they would have felt they gave it their best chance. And I think today they did not do that. Just some other notes from the game. Siraj went for runs today. I actually thought that Afghanistan batted really well in the power play. In fact, I thought they batted really well all the way through. But Mohammad Siraj overpitched quite a bit, and they really took advantage of that. And Jasprit Bumrah was so economical. Like, it was night and day comparing the two of them. And you can see here that this is, the least economical spell of Siraj. Look, he's been bowling sensational. I wouldn't be massively upset, but I do think that they asked him to search for wickets today, and he might have been better off just bowling his best bowling rather than doing this so much, but certainly struggled in this one. And then I wanted to talk about the Mat middle order. So you can see, they got off to an okay start, Afghanistan, and then they lost 2 wickets here, so they were 63 for 1. And they went to 63 for 3. And at that stage, even on a good batting pitch, I kind of thought that India would strangle the game. But they didn't. And, Shahidi and Omazai really, really batted well. And we haven't always seen strong middle orders from Afghanistan. And what I saw today, and I'm going to caveat this with the same thing I said with Rohit. It was a really good batting wicket. And I think on a poorer batting wicket, Afghanistan would have struggled to get 220. But what I saw today was a really strong, mature one-day international innings. And, this is probably the first, last 2 World Cups, I followed Afghanistan, a couple of World T20s, I followed them, at ground reporting for Cricinfo. And they've been a team I followed a lot in these tournaments. The one thing that I haven't seen enough of is just adult batting. Professional batting is probably even a better term of it. And I was watching, obviously their opener didn't make as many runs today, but he's one of those players. And the 2 Mats in the middle order, really starting to play like that. I mean, Shahidi, this might have been perhaps one of his best knocks in the format so far, especially considering the bowling that he was up against. Really, really impressed by them. I think from 63 for 3, I really thought that they would collapse, and they didn't. They gave those middle order guys really gave them a chance of scoring 300 and cashing in at the end. They're not quite a good enough team to be able to do that against bowling of this quality at the moment. But I was impressed. I was impressed by the way they faced Kuldeep. They waited for him to make mistakes, and he was really chasing wickets. He was bowling a lot of wrong-uns, and trying to bowl the magic ball. And I think they could see that. And they might not have been able to pick him, but they could. They did understand what he was trying to do. It was really quality batting there. And then who have we got here? Jasprit Bumrah, shall we? Why not? Why not do this? Most wickets in the Cricket World Cup in 2019 and 2023. No man should be compared to Mitchell Starc in World Cups because he's ridiculous again. But we're certainly seeing that, Bumrah is back to what we would want him to be. It was his second ODI World Cup fourfer, and he went at less than 5 runs and over, which I know Afghanistan's not a great batting lineup, but on that wicket, I thought it was a really impressive thing to be able to do that. 4 wickets for 39. And I think there was a narrative that Bumrah couldn't do it at times in that color blue. You know, there's been a lot. I've been told this a lot of how Bumrah is really good for Mumbai and not as good for India. I'm just gonna go back here. You know, look at this list. There's some really good bowlers a lot further down this list than where Bumrah is. I think he's an exceptional bowler and he's done it very well. And I think not having him in major tournament, you know, the World T20 is obviously a thing that you cannot overcome at times. But yeah, he's bowled in 5 ODIs this year and as preparation for the World Cup. So you might argue he's not quite in fully one-day form at the moment. But I think he's bowled very, very well since coming back from his injury, and a very important, non-important spell today, again, if that makes sense. As in, they were going to win anyway, but the fact that he bowled so well, especially early up, and then ended up with those wickets, if you're coming back from an injury, all these things really matter to you. So well done to him. And that's it for the scoreboard today. So what we will do now is I'll go into the chat and I'll find some questions. I've already seen there's some great super chats in there. If you're guaranteed to, if you desperately want your question answered, super chat is the best way of doing that. Please, comment, like, subscribe, do all those things. We're going to take a short break while I have a look through the room, and we will be back shortly with Jarrod Kimber and Scoreboard. Have you ever wondered how I watch so much cricket? I use VPNs to log into accounts from all around the world. But because before, even simple things like when something exciting would happen in a match, I would rush over to social media, and when I got there, the clips would say something along the lines of, "This video is not available in your area." In fact, most of the coolest cricket stuff in the world at the moment is geo-blocked because some random board didn't sign a deal where you happen to live. If you're a hardcore cricket nerd, the only way is to have a VPN, and we suggest Surfshark. They will give you the speed of your favorite quick bowler. They're as inventive as a T20 batter after a bunch of dot balls, and they're as secure as a specialist wicketkeeper with the softest hands in the world. And guess what? The kind folks at Surfshark are going to give you a deal. Enter the promo code Kimber for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Kimber. There are probably other things that Surfshark can help you with, like data and identity theft and traceability and intrusive advertising. But for us, it is our best weapon against the evil cricket geo-block. Go to Surfshark and type my name in, KIMBER, and get 3 months free today. Big thanks to everyone for following on with the scoreboard. I just realized I probably can't say following on a show because it's a different format and it's confusing. And also there's the TalkSport podcast called Following On, which makes it even more confusing. Please keep getting your comments in. I'd love to see the chat rooms doing really well today. Keep getting your comments in, like, subscribe, share, all the fun things. I've got some questions. I just want to start with one. Someone sent one last night. I can't remember if it was for Wagon Wheel or the live recording we did last night. But Shashvat said, what are your thoughts on cricket in the 2028 Olympics? How do you think cricketers and boards are going to approach it over the next 5 years? So I actually had the episode that got eaten by StreamYard. I actually had a bunch of stuff in there. I think it's wonderful that finally someone out there believes that cricket is on the same level as flag football. And if you didn't have to Google flag football when it got put into the Olympics, well done to you for knowing about some random American sport that apparently is played enough that it can sneak its way into the Olympics. It is remarkable that on one hand you have flag football, which is American football for people who don't want to get hit, and that gets in the Olympics at the same time that the world's second biggest sport does. And I used to say that basketball and cricket were arguing to be second biggest sport, but recently I've been looking at the Google numbers. Cricket is the world's second biggest sport. And certainly from a search engine perspective, if nothing else. What do I think? Look, it's obviously overdue. For those who don't know, cricket was in the Olympics in 1900, and it was a disaster from beginning to end. The games didn't make any sense. There were 4 teams who were supposed to turn up. Holland couldn't get a team, which is hilarious because obviously they're in the World Cup now. Belgium never showed up at all and were supposed to. France couldn't actually find any cricketers, and so the majority of the people who played for France were actually English workers who were over there making the Eiffel Tower. It's a beautiful fact. And the English team who won the gold medal although I don't think it was a gold. I think it was still silver or bronze at that stage. I have to go into my Olympic history. But the English team were I'm going to get this wrong. The Somerset and Devon Wanderers, I want to say they're called. Basically a club team. They had 2 players who were first class level, more or less, and then no one else. And so the French team didn't even have that. There was no Belgian team. There was no Holland team. And the one thing that I just want to say, it's just a fascinating story, now that cricket is in the Olympics, is that back in that point, cricket was so big. I don't think we understand how big it was around the world. Like, it was a well-known sport in America. It was a well-known sport in places like Argentina and, many other countries, partly through colonization, but also it's the sport where the phrase, is it superstar or megastar, comes from. And W.G. Grace, have a look at where he tours. He tours everywhere because everyone wanted W.G. Grace. And that was even before the Olympics. It's a huge sport. And, it was such a mess, that first one. And it was supposed to be in the next Olympics. It was supposed to be in the 1904 St. Louis, whatever that place is called. I've been there and I can't remember the name of it. But it was supposed to be in that Olympics and it fell through. And I believe it was also that they've talked about trying to get it to the Athens Olympics in 1896 as well. So it's incredible that it's taken all that time to get back in. But thank you for your super chat, Shashvat. Hopefully you're watching this show, or someone who knows you is telling you that I said all these things for you. Let's have a look. What have we got in the room today? Keshav says, why do India trust more in Shardul's hit and miss batting at 8 than Shami strike bowling with the ball? So I was actually going to do a whole video on this for tomorrow morning, and then Rohit did his thing, and I got in a bit of a Rohit vortex. So on the main channel tomorrow, there will be a Rohit video where we'll be looking at his case to be the greatest batter in World Cup history. But the Shardul thing, I do think is really interesting. And there's an impact when you want your players, when you want Rohit to bat the way that Rohit did. One of the most important things that you can do is make sure that the batting lineup is long. And you don't actually want, what is Shardul average? 17 with the bat, strike rate of 105 in ODI cricket. It's fine, but he's probably not going to win you many games, and he's probably not going to bat that often anyway, especially the way they're going at the moment. You hope that he's not going to bat. But Shardul being in the batting order is a big difference. Because when those Indian batters look up, they're like, okay, well, Jadeja's at 7, Shardul's at 8. And Ashwin has a similar effect here. And they suddenly think to themselves, well, wait a minute, we can go hard. There are people there. And this is a real effect. As an analyst, I promise you, you'll see it when I do the Shardul video. It's really fascinating because it is something that transcends cricket. Like, every level of cricket you do this. I played in a game recently, in a club game, and sort of looked at the batting order that our team had and like dialed down my attacking nature hugely. And I didn't really need to. The bowling wasn't of that level. It's almost like an automatic thing that players do. And so Shardul being there, even though his batting is not great, they have seen him bat and they trust him. And his IPL form, finally, after years of not making any runs from limited opportunities in the IPL, suddenly he has started to flourish a little bit more. His one day is fine. He's probably still, at his best in Test cricket. I'll explain all this in the video. But having that player in that order is really, really important for the top order players if you want them to play with more freedom. And that's why England stacked their batting lineup. Right? The original plan was to get as much batting in as possible and to say to the guys at the top, we're not going to drop you, and don't worry, because we've got backups. Andy with the super chat. Thank you very much, Andy. Who are your top 5 ODI batters ever? ABD gets overlooked because of the dumb choker narrative. His consistency and strike rate over stretch are unparalleled. Yeah, I would certainly have AB de Villiers. I would have Viv Richards. I would have Josh Butler now. Probably would be another one. Then you've got the sort of the best anchors. So Virat is obviously up there. Sachin is probably up there. Ponting's probably just away from that tier. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else I'm missing. I think the other guys are slightly further away in that tier. And I feel like I'm trying to work out if I'm missing anyone else. I think that's the majority. And then you've got Bevan and Dhoni, which it's just such a different role. But would be certainly in the conversation. I think very, very, very fairly. Even if I think already, if you look back at Bevan's numbers, you do start to think to yourself, wait, was he really this good? And then you're like, no, I was there. He was really this good. And Dhoni's going to have that same effect. I think people are going to look back and go, wait a minute, are we sure? I was like, yeah, no, we're sure. You're going to have to trust us. It's a bit like Jasprit Bumrah. Doesn't have very good numbers, but changed the way that ODI cricket was played, right? So there's also that impact. But I think I gave you about 6 or 7 sort of frontliners. Trying to remember if Kumar is up there and if I'm missing anyone else obvious. But those are the ones off the top of my head for sure. Rudra says, Siraj was really good before the World Cup, so I don't think his form should be too much of a worry. But is there anything you see in the way he's bowling that suggests he needs a break? No, nothing that suggests he needs a break. I thought today, I'm trying to think back to how he bowled against Australia. I thought that today he was just searching for wickets and probably pitching the ball up a little bit for him. And honestly, he may have been told this. They may have said, look, Bumrah's going to be Bumrah. We don't need him to search. He'll just be himself. Do you mind trying to get us a couple? There was something really interesting that Ian Smith, who had a shocker in commentary a couple of games ago and has really picked up his game again. They're doing so many games. Also, how many Australian commentators do they have? Like, even at a certain point, there's a lot of Australians. Anyway, Ian Smith kept talking about the fact that Rohit just kept that slip in. I think he kept 2 slips in for quite a while, even though Afghanistan was scoring well, and then had a slip in, even at the time when you would have thought, let's probably move them out. So I think we know that India was attacking, and with that, I think we can understand that perhaps Siraj was the bowler that they told. They said, look, go for wickets today. We can finish this game off, get a net run rate result. Didn't work, unfortunately, for him, but I would assume that was the issue there. Sukat says, I'm watching England-Afghanistan live on Sunday. Enjoy the game. Can you create a realistic scenario of what would have to happen for Afghanistan to take the upset? Well, Rashid Khan will have to stop getting hit for 10 runs and over against good teams. Sukat, I think that would be number one. No, I think if their seamers / Mujib can get a couple of wickets in the power play and the spinners can find a way to chip away, and get that 3rd, 4th, 5th sort of wickets and get themselves into a situation where maybe England are 4 or 5 down around the 30, 35 over mark. And England try to step on the gas after maybe being frustrated by the spinners in the middle. There is a possibility at that stage that they could do the upset. The problem is, even though England's bowling is not as good as India's bowling, I don't know if Afghanistan can score, let's say within 10% of par. Because I think they need to be within, maybe not, maybe within 20% of par is what they need, or 15% of par. But that's what they need to be able to do, I think, to beat the better teams. Is they don't have to go nuts, because I don't think they have that team unless someone like Babar unless someone has a day out. And I think a lot of those better teams are just smart enough that when someone's having a day out, they can negate it a little bit more than some of the other teams can. But yes, so I would think that they will score less than par. But if they're par adjacent, or in the par region, then I certainly think at that stage that Afghanistan have a chance of having an upset. But it's unlikely, right? The problem with playing England as a smaller team is your only chance is wickets. Even the better teams probably need to take wickets, but they might on certain surfaces and in certain situations be able to slow England down a little bit. I think if you're a poorer team, your only option against them is to take 10 wickets. Or, a healthy 6 in the first 35 overs. Experts class Virat as one of the GOATs in ODI, but Rohit isn't recognised in the same breath, despite having a stellar World Cup record and a great overall ODI record. I'd have to get their stats up off the top of my head, but I would say that when you're talking about the World Cup records, I don't think it's a bit like baseball and basketball playoffs, right? Or maybe Champions League in football. We haven't got to a point in cricket where I think we talk about this enough. It's one reason I bang on about Mitchell Starc and Trent Boult as World Cup specialist bowlers, because I don't think we actually give them the credit that they deserve for being so dominant in multiple World Cup tournaments. Shakib's another one, right? And because of this, we don't separate this. So you look at the overall records. I'm just going to have to look at Kohli's off the top of my head. But my guess is that Kohli averages a significant amount more in a one-day cricket than... So it's what, 7-8 runs more. That's a big, big step up, right? And strike rate, let's have a look at his strike rate in one-day cricket. Where am I going to find his strike rate? Is also higher than Virat, right? So, than Rohit. So I think that's the reason. The other one is, I don't know if you saw this the other day, but I did or maybe, is it out yet? In fact, it may not be out yet. It's the Kapil Dev video, which will be out soon. And hey, Rohit went past Kapil Dev's record today. I didn't even mention that. At least we saw this innings. It wasn't, just pictures of flowers and a mullet. Great mullet Kapil had back then. Like a curly mullet, one of the best mullets. If you're going to have a mullet, I think the curls really take it to another level. But yeah, I think he's considerably not as good as Virat. And when I looked at his numbers, and this might change, especially if he keeps batting the way he is, but his numbers for the vast majority of his career are not better than Viv Richards' numbers. So they had a very similar strike rate and a very similar average. Now, obviously, I've just said that Viv Richards might still be the greatest ODI player, batter of all time. So, it's not bad company, but you are talking about playing 45, 50 years after Viv Richards and still having a very, very poor strike rate when compared to, the same strike rate when compared to someone who was playing in another era whose strike rate was 10 times better than everyone else. So there's a drop off there. And I do think that matters. And if you look at Virat, his thing is the average, right? I think he's averaging more than Michael Bevan now. Like of the major run scorers, I know you've got a lot of, you've got Rassi and Shubman Gill and Babar. But of the guys with the serious batting totals, I would have thought that Virat is very high up on that list. And so I think it's easier to make his case. But Rohit makes 300s in this World Cup. And then you've got the Mitchell Starc thing of like, when the one-day cricket mattered, he was absolutely spectacular. Shrikant says, I love your vids. Well, I love your comment, Shrikant. Do you think the pitches have been too batting friendly so far? No, I think if you go back, I think there were lots of pitches that were helping the bowlers. It's probably the last 2 days when we've really seen batting wickets. And then we saw the Sri Lanka, South Africa game. So I think we've seen a lot of wickets that have helped bowlers and a lot of wickets that have helped batters so far. I was actually thinking that, I think I was saying on this channel, I thought it was more of a Bowlers World Cup at a certain point, and things seem to have changed around a little bit there. Karen says, is there a chance that the hunger you allude to, so this was about Rohit, could have something to do with his perceived fitness issues? No. I mean, his perceived fitness issues might mean that he's not as good a player as he could be. But it's more to do with he doesn't have that kind of fight. Like, watch Ricky Ponting bat. I always said that Ricky Ponting batted like someone who was trying to make like almost like a political case, right? Like trying to win a war, right? Like so strong. Virat was very much like that. Go back through, Viv Richards was another one that was very much like that. Then you've got the guys who were desperate for runs, like Bradman and Tendulkar. I'm trying to think of someone else. But, those sorts of guys who were absolutely, Boycott, absolutely desperate to make the next run, or in Boycott's face the next ball maybe. But that sort of thing. Then you have the guys who want to impose their will on a game. Hayden, Clive Lloyd, Hammond was probably one of those, that kind of, Compton, that style. And if you look at Rohit, he's got lots of different skills of all the guys I've mentioned. But he's not trying to impose his will on the game. He's not one of those people who is desperate for the next run every time. He's not one of those people that bats like there's a higher purpose, right? He's a little bit more his own kind of person. And the Markram thing, now that I've said it, is actually quite an interesting comp, because when they were young, they were going to be the next big thing, right? And then over time, what happened is other players went past them. And some of those other players went past them for varying reasons. But it's because they had some of the other attributes that I was talking about before. And I do think that it's interesting that both of those players have eventually matured into the kind of players that we thought they should have been young. It just took them a little bit longer. That could be belief. That could be repetition. That could be role definition in Rohit's case. It could be just late maturation. All these different things could play a part, right? And every batter is, one thing I try and do when I'm writing features on people is I really try and work out what makes that person get out of bed in the morning. And it's very, very different for all different players. And I think that for Rohit specifically, I would really struggle to work out what his motivation would be. Whereas there's a lot of players throughout the world where it's just like, you could kind of see it from a distance, exactly what they need. Okay. Aditya says, do you think Radhi is going through a dip in his form? Oh, Rashid. You got me with the typo there, man. Do you think that Rashid is going through a dip in his form? Recently seeing a lot of runs from his bowling, and it's been like this from the past 7 ODIs. I think he's struggling with really good batting lineups. I don't think it's a dip in form. I do think, like lots of players now, he's probably struggling with handling the move from T20 cricket to one-day cricket. There are players where it does, like for someone like Bumrah, I don't think there's many changes he needs to make other than he needs to be aware that he needs to bowl more overs and probably has to bowl more of that middle over spell occasionally. Like that is a slightly different role than probably you would see in T20 cricket. Where there are other players where, like Maxwell, and Josh Butler, those are two really good examples of players who they almost have to think differently about what they were doing. Rashid Khan has what I would call a T20 length. He bowls a little bit shorter on purpose. He is relying on the fact that you are going to make a mistake from over-attacking him. And if you don't do that, you're probably going to have to defend and try and milk him, which means he'll end up with 7-8 runs and over. And, chances are that if someone else bowls good that day, he gets something. It might even be less than that. It might be 6 runs and over, right, on his best day. All of that doesn't exist in one-day cricket. They're just milking him. And the best players have found a way to do that very effectively in one-day cricket, which they have not managed to do as consistently in T20 cricket. So I do think that is a very, very interesting thing with him. The form dip, I'm not as worried about that because this now goes back to the 2019 World Cup. And we had it on the video after their first game, how much he struggles. And I will do something on this because I think there's something deeper there. But I need to go deep dive into the data and also the video just to have a real look at what is going on with his bowling. All right, I've got some time for some more questions because we just had the one game today. Me and Cheyenne probably didn't have as much stuff on because we're used to doing some double headers. Cheyenne's going out to the game tomorrow, so I'm on my own. So it'll probably be the shortest show of all time. But I've got some time for some more questions. So I'll take a quick ad. Remember, super chats I will definitely get to. But anything they put in the room that takes my fancy, I will have a look at. You're watching the Scoreboard with Jared Kimber. Oh, and we're live every day of this World Cup. I just feel like I hadn't said that yet. And I really did want to say it so that everyone knew that we're live every day of this World Cup because we're live every day of this World Cup. This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. Join our new YouTube channel, Jared Kimber Podcast. Engage with live recordings or listen to the thought-provoking chats 4 times a week, exploring shows like Wagon Wheel, Uncovered, Footmarks, and Red Inker. They cover everything from fan questions, weekend stories, articles, videos, what's going on in cricket, and just anything we want to talk about when it comes to the bat and ball game. Want to have live chats with me or just connect with other cricket fans on Discord that also enjoy my content? Or a few AMAs. Maybe you want early podcast episodes or ad-free content or want to receive my emailer. You can get all of this on our Patreon, plus a little bit of behind-the-scenes stuff as well. Huge thanks to everyone who has supported us on Patreon so far. You are all part of this channel's success. All right, welcome back. All right, let's have a look. I think we've got a couple more super chats that have come in. Oh, here we go. And someone called Gavin has given me money, and thank you very much, Gavin, for giving me money. If you have a question as well, I didn't see the question come through. I will go back in. I'm going to really balls your name up here, but I'll try it. Saptagarish, it doesn't feel right. I apologize in advance. Says, our thoughts on tweaking the format with round robin followed by the best of 3 finals for the top 2, or does the drama of a knockout still worth it instead of trying to get the to the best by elimination? Look, I like the old Super 6. Also, don't think we're that far away from quarterfinals as well. Look, as a basketball fan and a Test cricket fan, I like multiple games. I know that there can be fluke events in one game. You know, I think New Zealand did great in the World Cup in, where was it? Old Trafford, when they beat India. But it's a fluke event, that, right? And there's another game I was looking at in one of the older World Cups, which I think, I suppose the 99 World Cup, the coming down to the last ball. Well, not the last ball. So from that perspective, as a sports fan, I do like the idea of having best ofs. I don't, weirdly enough, for a sport that believes in best ofs in bilaterals even, but certainly in Test cricket, we don't seem to really think of it. And look, if India and Pakistan make the semi-finals and you have multiple games, ICC is just going to be printing money, even more than they already print money. I suppose maybe it's crypto now. I don't know. So yeah, I do think that is something. But look, the next tournament will be different. Of course, 14 teams. They'll be looking at these things going forward. I kind of think in T20, this is the way to go even more so, because I think you do get fluke events in one-day cricket. I'm sure not always the best teams make it to the finals. New Zealand in 92 is a really, they were definitely, them and Pakistan were the best 2 teams in that tournament. And Pakistan were really good against New Zealand. New Zealand were really good against everyone else. And I would love to have seen them go up against each other a couple of times, especially with, the injury to Martin Crowe and everything else. So there are other ways of doing it. I do agree with that, but I don't think in one-day World Cup, I think it's already a really long tournament. I don't think it would be pushed in that direction. And I believe that they think that at the moment, and I haven't talked to anyone from the World Cup in a while, ICC in a while about this, but I think they believe at the moment that one thing they like about the 10-team World Cup is the everyone plays everyone aspect of it. And your idea, while fairly sound, I don't think quite plays into that side of it. Let me just see if Gavin... here's his message. I knew Gavin would come through. Thank you very much for the super chat, Gavin. Oh, Govind. Sorry. I thought there was an A there. What are your thoughts on having ICC ordained pitches for major tournaments? It makes sense to have home advantage in bilateral series, but lots of teams otherwise seem to be left out. Well, the ICC do look after these pitches. So when did they start doing it? Is it 2017 Champions Trophy, I want to say? I think that was the time when they started doing it. So yeah, there are... This actually has a long history as well. It goes back to 1987. India were worried that their pitches would get bad press in the West, which they probably would have no matter what, as we're now more than aware. And they hired, what's his name? The Adelaide Oval curator, Len? I forget, I should know his name. Les Burdett. And they hired him and they brought him over. But yes, no, the ICC do look after the wickets. They do have a look at them. At a certain point, I think kind of all internationals should be looked after by the ICC, but that's clearly not going to happen for many, many reasons I won't get into now. But yes, what they did want is, especially I think what started to happen was more. I always say the most pitch doctoring you will find in cricket is at the T20 level, because it makes sense. Like I've had owners say to me, what should we do, blah blah blah, and I said, spend all your money on spinners and make sure that your pitch spins. It's the best guarantee of success. You make the finals every year. You might not win, but you make the finals all the time. And one year you might ask one, and as that was coming in more and more, I think the ICC were like, we need to be involved in this. So yes, there are overseas pitch inspectors. There are other people who've been working on the wickets and everything else. The ICC would have asked for specific kinds of wickets. At a certain point, wickets get tired. We've had weather conditions in certain parts of, there's no way that for the last World Cup, the T20 World Cup, that anyone wanted the wickets to be that seam friendly for a T20 World Cup. Conditions usually win out, and pitches are, there are some pitches you can really change, and there are some pitches you can't. Thank you very much for your super chat, Govind. Why can't I take him off the screen now, though? Oh, well, there was his super chat. I'm all over it. Anmol says, do you think playing too many leagues and T20s is damaging players like Rashid? Yeah, it's damaging all people. It depends on what you mean by damaging. The idea is for them to make lots of money and have a great life. And Rashid Khan is doing that. And if T20s didn't exist, he wouldn't have done that. But he doesn't play as much Test cricket as he should, so he struggles sometimes in that format. He doesn't play as much one-day cricket as he should, and he's struggling in that format at times as well. He's still got a good overall record, so I don't think there's an issue from that point of view. But yeah, it does affect. Josh Buttler and Jason Roy. We've talked about this a lot on this channel so far, of players saying, I don't really know how to play one-day cricket anymore. So I don't know if it's damaging them, but if as a writer, if I only write one kind of article for months on end, and then I suddenly have to write a different kind of article, I struggle to go back into the other groove. And that first one back probably isn't as good as it should be. Sunit says, just came back from watching today's match live. Great match and stadium. BCCI's handling of this event is pathetic, though. Going forward, the ICC event management firm, should take over this. Yeah, I don't think we need another World Cup where we have this issue again. I think from here on in, that's what the ICC is for, is to make events. Essentially, I make fun of Srinivasan and Clark for the way they used to talk about the ICC. But essentially, the way that cricket is set up, they are right. Make sure the umpires are there on time. Make sure that there is some sort of adjudication policy, that you can get global sponsors occasionally for us. But the rest of the time, just you have fun with your little events, and we'll run the rest of cricket around you. So why would you then get the organization who's so good at all this to not be the leading voice in running a tournament? And it's very frustrating. See, I was there in 2016. There were some issues in 2016, but it seems like it's a lot worse now. And I would love to talk to a journalist who covered both events and really traveled around, did the full whack of them at the end to see what they think of the differences between the two. But 2016 had some issues. The Pune thing, no, not Pune, Nagpur, with the first game where you couldn't buy tickets at the ground. You had to go to the old Nagpur Stadium. So people came all the way out to the ground to buy tickets to Hong Kong, Zimbabwe, I want to say. Got to the ground and were told they had to go all the way back into the city. So things like that happened in that tournament. But overall, things got sorted quicker, and it seemed to me to be a little bit more professional. This is not professional at the moment. All Things Cinema Vodcast. I've never listened to the All Things Cinema Vodcast, but they do a lot of comments. So if you're into All Things Cinema and vodcasts, I would go and watch All Things Cinema Vodcast. What loopholes do you see in this Indian squad that could possibly come in their way of winning the World Cup? There's no loopholes in the squad. They've got two all-rounders. One's a seamer, one's a spinner. They've got top five. Obviously, the Shubman Gill thing, I suppose. You put Rohit's form today with Shubman Gill at the other end, and that's going to be a problem massively. Seam bowling's great. Spin bowling's great. The Shardul thing, look, he's a weak player, but Australia won a World Cup with Andy Bickle, right? And Andy Bickle was a better bowler than Shardul, but not as good a batter as Shardul, although in that tournament he was. The point is that I think if you go through World Cup winning teams, there are quite often weaker players involved. The West Indies certainly had a couple in some of their wins. The 83 India team wasn't strong. 87 Australia team wasn't always strong. So teams have won World Cups with, one player who isn't great. The only thing that I think can bother them, another team can play better, right? Especially in the semi-final or the final. That can happen. But if you're looking for banana peels, it is at a point where they suddenly realize that they are expected to win the tournament and the pressure gets on them and they have one bad game. At that point, they could change their mindset and change the way they're playing, and that could cause big issues. Injury, I suppose, is the other obvious one that always happens. And especially in a tournament of this length, sudden loss of form of like 3 or 4 players. You see this in T20 tournaments all the time. Like really good teams on paper, and like 4 of their batters aren't in form at the right time. These things happen in cricket. It's so regular. And batters come in and out of form quite regularly. You only need 3 of them to go into a funk and, things change. Pratik says, how do people compare Virat with Babar? Can you speak on it with stats? Well, isn't it because they both average pretty similar in ODI cricket? Like, I don't think you need anything particularly special here. Babar hasn't reached his peak batting years yet, which should be the next 4 or 5 years. And in ODI cricket, he averages pretty much exactly the same as Virat Kohli. That's why he's being compared to him. I think that one's pretty fair. Doesn't mean he's as good as him. Doesn't mean he'll go on to have the same kind of career or the same kind of impact or same kind of success from a team point of view or anything else. Strike rate is certainly lower, I think. What's his strike rate? About 5 or 6 less, I think. Trying to remember Virat's number off the top of my head there. It's got to do it for a similar amount of time and everything else. At the moment, I think Babar's made a lot of runs in Pakistan, and he's been a very good player away from home. But I think we need to, that's probably something that he needs to rectify. He needs to have a couple of big World Cups as well, all these sorts of things. But yeah, it makes sense that you would compare them. They both average almost identically in one-day cricket. And I think we've got our last super chat. Girish, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Do you think we will breach the 500 mark this time? 300 seems to be par. 350 is being hunted down by good batting teams, and 400 is threatened every now and again. So in 2015, I was pretty sure we were going to see teams pass 500. And I can't remember what the highest score was. Was it maybe the West Indies South Africa game when South Africa went crazy? We saw some big chases in that tournament, and it didn't stick around. And it was more, I think, that those were just really flat batting pitches and some very small grounds in New Zealand. And so we had some outlier performances from 2015 through to 2023 through England, but also just through natural, aggressive, T20 coming on board and people understanding things a little bit more and all those sorts of things. We've seen this, steady progression. I think 300 is closer to par now than it's ever been before. I think in 2019, everyone was going on about 300 being par. And I was like, well, there's only one team who scores at a run of ball in one-day cricket. So if it's par for England and no one else. We're now getting to the point where we're seeing 3 and 4 teams around that mark. So it is probably par for the better teams. I think the 500 is, as I commentated Netherlands when England should have passed 500 in that score. Incredible over by Logan Van Beek. I will remember that over forever. So yeah, I commentated that particular game, and I think a lot of things had to go right for you to be able to do it, obviously. Whether you could do it in a World Cup, I would doubt. That said, we have seen some outlandish, individual innings. We have seen some really good team innings, but I would believe that it would need to be a bilateral. But yes, a 500 will be breached, but I don't think it will be breached in this World Cup. But I do think before the next World Cup, it will certainly go past. But it's the World Cup pressure is the only reason I would say that you wouldn't do it. Only because even if you're going up against Netherlands or Afghanistan or whoever the team may be, you might be knocking the ball around for 5 or 6 overs before you put the foot down. Whereas perhaps in a bilateral, you're like, you might just go from ball one. And that 5 over difference is probably the difference between scoring 500 and not scoring 500. It's a really good question, but I do think that there is a possibility, but I wouldn't think that it will happen in this World Cup. But it would be spectacular if it did, of course. Ashish says, why is the BCCI taking over the event management instead of the ICC? Did this also happen during the 2019 World Cup? Any gossip on how they screwed this up? No, 2019. So what usually happens is very early on, the ICC will start to plan the next event. So I know a lot of people who work from the ICC. I should know this better, but you will see the email will be set up. You'll start getting, you'll be put on that chain. You'll start seeing things like, it's only 1,943 days until the next World Cup or till this World Cup. And so they put some people on the ground. So I think there's already people in the Caribbean and the West Indies. I think I'm right in saying that. They might not be there right now because they might be needed in this World Cup. But they start to get there early. They start to work out all the details and everything else. And then it's kind of a joint thing where the ICC provide the structural knowledge of how to run these tournaments. And the locals, of course, provide that, well, you can't do that here because this. Or we understand why you want to do it that way. Is it okay if we do it this way because of this? Right? So there are quite often you'll get people from the boards who will be seconded to the ICC. The ICC doesn't actually have that many staff. When the Big Three takeover was happening, Cricket New Zealand had more media staff than the ICC did. It's ridiculous. And they don't have staff because boards don't want to give them extra money to hire more people, right? They actually would prefer the ICC to have less staff because then the ICC gets blamed for everything that the boards are actually doing. Whole different point. I made a movie about this once. But anyway, so you usually have seconded people. And the other thing that the ICC will do is around this event, they will bring in specialists from different boards. They're getting really, really good at this. You know, people from the Bangladesh board, people from the South Africa board, all these different people they'll bring in for the event. So then you do have this really great mix of people. Plus you have the sort of hardcore ICC people who know how to put this thing together. And you then have a partnership with whoever the local board is. And it's all sort of done together. This tournament, from what I have been told, and the ICC are still involved, but they're taking more of a secondary role. And the BCCI wanted to take the major role. As far as I'm aware, it's the first time that this has happened in 20 years, say, right? As the ICC's got bigger and more professional, more used to holding events, people have just pushed all the work towards them. And then, taking the credit themselves. And the BCCI really wanted to do this. But as I've said before, I don't know why the BCCI wanted to do it, other than some certain people wanted power and all those sorts of obvious things. But it didn't make a lot of sense to me because there's already a spine and a backbone of people ready to do this. You could still take the credit for the tournament, but more importantly, the BCCI doesn't run the IPL, right? The IMG run the IPL. And the IMG, again, heaps of people who go around the world who do all these sorts of things. It's just a different skill than running a cricket board. This, as bad as this is, this doesn't suggest that the BCCI is a bad cricket board. You can make that argument separately. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I'm saying you can make that argument separately. What this tells you is creating a world event when you are not used to creating a world event is really, really hard. And that is what we have seen so far in this tournament. God, so many super chats. Thank you very much. And that was Ashish on that last one. Give in, sis. See, I know it's an O now. See, on the right-hand side of my screen, it looks like an A. But over here, I can see it's an O. I know you covered this earlier, but I don't particularly fancy cricket being the Olympics. I can't imagine it would further the popularity of cricket and would only add to a busy calendar. So, Govind, thank you for your money. Let me tell you now how wrong you are. The people who generally say this are from the major cricket nations, and they follow major men's cricket. If you are an Indian fan or an English fan, South African fan, Sri Lankan fan, New Zealand fan, it's probably not going to make a big difference to your men's cricket teams if they're in the Olympics or not. To your women, it will make the biggest difference that we've ever seen in women's cricket. The investment, the structures, everything else. Teams, countries that don't support their women's side suddenly going, wait a minute, we're a chance of a sneaky Olympic medal here, and we already have okay side. We just need to make everyone professional, put some money and get some good coaches. Maybe build a league. Disability cricket. Disability cricket at the moment is not run by the ICC. It is run by so there's all these different kinds of disability. There's the blind, the deaf, physical disability, mental disability. Is it wheelchair cricket? I think might be one of the other. There's like 5 or 6 of them. They have no funding. They're not professional. I've tried to contact these people on their Facebook pages, on their websites. I've called them up. They don't even answer because they're amateurs, right? And they got lives. This Olympics for that, absolutely massive. The other thing is the emerging markets. China have been very clear with the ICC from the start. You get cricket in the Olympics, we're coming, right? USA, again, you now have the ability to be an Olympic athlete. Think about how college sports work. A big part of college sport is getting people either into American professional sports or into the Olympics. Again, Brazil, who now have this incredible women's movement coming through, they're going to be looking at this going, well, wait a minute, we actually have an okay team. We can qualify for the Olympics, and, you know, it's a really good story for us without us having to spend lots of money. Parts of Europe, exactly the same sort of thing. Across the associate world, you have no idea, given how big this could be for cricket. The busy schedule thing is, we're talking about 2 weeks, man. We can't find 2 weeks. Essentially, I believe what they will do, and some of this will depend on the World Cup, whether the ODI, the 50-over World Cup remains. But essentially, what they will do is the ICC want to have one major men's competition every year, and they'll probably get to a point where they want to have one major women's competition every year. So every 4 years, you'll have a World Cup. Every 4 years, you'll have an Olympics. Then there might be some sort of, you know, Champions League type situation in between those. Or we keep the 50-over tournament, and then we have one T20 World Cup, one ODI World Cup, a Champions Trophy, which will probably be T20 if they keep it around, or a version of that. And then you have the Olympics. Plenty of time for that. I mean, of all the things that we have time for, a 2-week tournament every 4 years is definitely one of them. What we don't have time for is most of the other cricket that is already being played. This would revolutionize cricket all around the world. It should have happened generations ago. Cricket, it should be ashamed of itself for not getting involved in this. The ICC, the IOC were desperate, right? In the same way that they went after the Dream Team, they went after the Indian cricket team. They don't care about cricket, the IOC, but they do care about having 1 billion eyeballs on that team. They want to have LeBron and Joker and some football star and some track star all in a photo shot together at the Olympics, right? They're desperate for this, and cricket just didn't get its act together. And a lot of it was, one of the things that the IOC kept saying was, your women's sport isn't strong enough. Your women's aren't strong enough, right? What a embarrassment that is for cricket, that's the situation that we got ourselves in. But we're there. We're moving forward. And I think it's a huge thing. I've been, you know, as someone who's covered all of cricket, from disability cricket all the way through, I don't think people understand the kind of impact this could have. Also, I always think that India doesn't take the Olympics as seriously. Maybe this is one thing that sort of kickstarts the Olympic movement even more in India. I know the last couple of years it's certainly gone up, but it could be huge. And it won't just be athletes from Kerala representing India anymore. Thank you very much for the super chat, though, Gavin. Raj says, hi, Jared, can we get a video on Kerry Packer? I know there were 2 major changes in terms of finance within cricket. I know about the IPL, not much about Packer. They've been way more than that, mate. Way more than that. We will eventually get a Kerry Packer video. We did a big series, me and Abhishek, on the men who bought cricket, and we might actually be looking at getting a book deal out of that as well. And we didn't do Kerry Packer because he's a season on his own of the podcast. Once we have the season of podcast written up, I think we'll probably make a video of that. But there's some great stuff out there, of course. One of the reasons I don't want to do anything is because Gideon's book was so good. That Channel 9, mini-series was really, really good. How's that, if you can find that anywhere? And I don't feel like it's one thing, I know quite a bit about it, but I'm certainly not an expert on it. But yes, I think one day it would, there's no way I won't be able to do. I grew up, under that under what happened afterwards. So it's always been a huge part of my cricket journey, and I'll get to that. And we're watching a World Cup. in day night with colored clothing. You know, Kerry Packer's ghost lives on. He's angry, sweary ghost. I think that's me. I'm actually doing another live later on. I know a lot of you will be in bed by then. Some of you should be in bed. I'm doing another live it will either be in an hour and a half's time or 2.5 hours time. I think it might be 2.5 hours time. When we do that, I might push that back, Muku, if you're listening, which will allow me to get dinner and finish my Rohit piece that I now need to do. Thanks, Rohit. I was almost finished that Shardul piece, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to pivot. Sports journalist's nightmare. The cricket's too good. I can't ignore it. But yes, there'll be a Rohit video in the morning. We'll be looking at what he's done as a World Cup player, which is remarkable, of course. And there's so many other videos we've got. Hopefully, we've got 2 really cool ones on Kapil Dev's World Cup in 1983 and Lance Klusener's World Cup in 1999. Plenty of other really great things. You know, thank the whole team. But if you like this live, subscribe now. We will be here every day of the World Cup. Tell every single person you have ever met. Go out on the streets and shake a tin if you have to. But thank you so much to all of you who've come over. It's still a new channel. We understand that. We're not expecting the sort of numbers we get on the other one. But so happy that so many of you have come over and supported the show. And guess what? We will be back again tomorrow. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Oh yeah, you're not getting rid of us here on the Scorecard with Jared Kimber.
A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be. And from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster or making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport,